Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the July 9th, 2024 meeting of the EA Drainage District Number 1. Roll call, we have Mr. Roberry, Mr. Turner, Mr. PT, and Mr. Mason are absent. All others are present. And I'm going to ask Mr. Arsenault, please lead us in the invocation and pledge of allegiance.
God, thank you for today. Thank you for another opportunity to serve our parish. God, we pray that you would bless our discussions, bless our decisions, and bless Ascension Parish. In your name we pray. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Arsenault. Agenda item number 3, public comment sign-in period. If anyone would like to speak on any of our agenda items, please come and see Miss Leslie over here. She'll get a card for you, and whenever we get to the agenda item, you will be able to speak for 3 minutes. Item number 4, acceptance of minutes of the June 11, 2024 EA Drainage meeting. Motion by Mr. OJ, a second by Mr. Vornado. Any objection? Hearing none, so moved. Chairman's reports announcement. I have none. Unfortunately, Mr. Mason and Mr. PT or Chair and Vice Chair are out of town this week, so I'm filling in. Agenda item number 6, discussion and presentation of the off-site drainage assessment, H&H Milan code revisions. And with us, we have Mr. Sean Chereau from CSRS. And
excuse me, Chair?
Yeah.
Did you skip the minutes?
We just went through them.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Yeah. We got Mr. Chereau and Mr. Stoker Brown in the audience with us, so if y'all want to do your thing. And Mr. Poche, of course.
Yes, sir. Yeah, Jerry, I just came up here. Jairus has it set up on the presentation for it. We have included, now it was introduced at the last council meeting. We're trying to get this thing through as quickly as possible. And we did include the ordinances as they were recommended by the Planning Commission. And if there are any questions, we have information that anything you guys want to discuss, we can discuss before then. And with that, I'll
let everyone, and this is the presentation on the ordinances that are on, that will be on the council meeting for July 18th, next Thursday, the ones that were introduced.
Yeah, all right.
Mr. Stoker, how are you?
Good evening. I'm
Want
good.
to introduce yourself? I don't know if all my colleagues have had the
Sure.
pleasure.
Yes. Stoker Brown with CSRS. One of the principals and the water resources practice lead. I had our H&H division and hydraulic modeling for CSRS. And had the privilege of working for Ascension Parish on developing the two-dimensional models as part of the floodplain management plan that I'll be presenting an additional use for them today. So to get in with it, the drainage ordinance and floodplain models timeline. So there were 2 main parallel paths going on regarding drainage protection. So path 1 was an update of the drainage ordinances. Excuse me while I move this out of the way. Some key updates were made in 2019 following extreme rain events. Hiring a consultant to make major edits in the fall of 2022, minor tweaks to the ordinance in fall of 2022. At the same time, the parish was moving forward with the parish-wide floodplain management plan. H&TB team that CSRS was a part of was hired in 2017 to prepare the floodplain models and floodplain master plan. That floodplain management plan was just recently completed in June of 2023. So what are the parish floodplain management plan models? These were developed for the floodplain management plan to help understand what flood risk was within the parish on the east bank of the Mississippi River. It utilized the standard Army Corps of Engineers software called HECRAS, full two-dimensional models. I'll show you an example of what that looks like. And their current uses, excuse me, on top of using them to support the floodplain management plan, or to support grant funding applications through the ADAPT program, as well as the DPW uses to help understand parish drainage projects assistance. Here is a map of the 4 sub-basin floodplain management plan models. So Henderson Bayou Pierre Basin, Bayou Manchac Basin, the Marvin Bro Basin, and the Bayou Conway Panama Canal Basin. Those are 4 separate models that encompass the East Bank. There is also a regional model of the entire Amite River watershed that covers the Amite River and provides flood risk estimate outside of the levied system. Here is an example of flood depth that you get from the model. So this is the Marvin Bro system. And what you're seeing on the screen is the resultant peak flood depth during a 100-year or 1% annual exceedance probability storm event. So the darker the blues, the deeper the water. You can see that focuses around the main channels throughout the basin. And the lighter the blue, the more shallow the water is. Some unique information that we get from these types of models are, this is supposed to be an animation, but it looks like it's not playing. Some additional information we get from these 2D models is we're able to understand the direction of flow of water over the surface throughout the entire watershed. And so if you can imagine, if you will, these white lines moving in a certain direction, that indicates the flow of the water, and the faster those are moving, the higher the velocity of the water. So as opposed to a one-dimensional model, which is traditional FEMA-type modeling, we have a better understanding of where that water's going in the overbanks of the channel. Certainly the water in the channel is flowing down the stream, but the overbanks, if it rains a little bit, water might be flowing one way. If it rains a lot, it could be flowing another way, especially in this shallow sloping terrain we live in South Louisiana. So these models are critical for understanding the dynamics of that. Oh, look at that.
There it is.
You no longer have to imagine.
There you
Feast your eyes.
go. You just had to click it one more time.
That's it. Normally, it's set to start automatically. Somebody must have messed with my presentation. Okay, moving on. So you may be asking, how are other communities using similar models? East Baton Rouge Parish and the City of Central have similar two-dimensional models that cover the entirety of their municipality. The City of Central has revised their ordinance to use these models to assess flood impacts due to new developments called the Offsite Drainage Assessment Program, or ODA for short. A copy of these models are available to a developer upon request and after the execution of a model release form. The city manages the Offsite Drainage Assessment Program and implemented a fee structure for that following 1-year trial period, which the city covered the cost. East Baton Rouge Parish also revised their ordinances to require the use of their models to assess potential future developments and their impact to the watershed. A copy of those models can be downloaded from their development department website. The parish allows the developers to submit an ODA. However, the city parish confirms the results independently. And I'll go back to the City of Central and clarify that the City of Central performs an independent assessment of that proposed development in their own model. And currently, the East Baton Rouge Parish does not assess any additional fee if an off-site drainage assessment is required. Real-world example of what this off-site drainage assessment looks like using these models. Here is an example development, and Mickey is not in the crowd, but Mickey, this is an example of a project that I present often. It was one of his developments. This is a proposed area within the City of Central. The proposed development plot is outlined here in black. Here is the existing terrain. So this is LiDAR elevations. The higher the elevation on the ground are in whites, sloping down to the grays, reds, oranges, greens, and ultimately blue is the lowest, which you can see down in those channels. What we do for the off-site drainage assessment program is we build in that proposed development into the model as if it was there. We run and we simulate the existing conditions, which you see here on the map. Notice that did start animation right away. And so we can see those flow paths going across the site and through the site. Then we look at the proposed conditions and run those in the same analysis with the same storm events, the 10-year, the 25-year, and the 100-year. We process those results to understand how that proposed development would increase or decrease peak water surface elevations throughout that watershed. For example, here in the first iteration of this proposed development, there was an increase of water surface elevations on the west side of this development indicated in the shaded red, and there was a decrease indicated in the shaded green on the southeast side of this property. Essentially, the proposed development was blocking flow from going across it. Then less flow was able to go across the development than existing conditions. This did not meet the requirements of the city of Central, which needed to show that there was no impact as a result of this development. So a discussion was had with the developer, and they provided an alternative proposed development. Too much water. They flushed more water downstream than before. So we see the red shaded area in the southeast. A third iteration showed that it was fairly close to having an acceptable solution. However, this proposed development permit was pulled. And I say all that, and I think if it comes up in discussion, we've got an analysis of the off-site drainage assessments that occurred throughout the city of Central to look at the cost of them over time. And this one is in there, and you can see it went through multiple iterations and essentially was pulled. However, there have been successful off-site drainage assessments run showing that it can be achieved to have a development within the floodplain show no increased impacts throughout the watershed. So key points of these proposed ordinances, and I guess I'll say, if I may, Chair, to take any questions as they may come up.
Okay, yeah, if anybody has any question at any point, I have my screen. No, I'll do this just in case I see. Okay, go ahead.
So key points of the proposed ordinance. So this is think of it more as enhancing something that you already require, right? You already require an existing conveyance check that is to not flush more water downstream or block water from flowing downstream and creating impacts. This is just a more advanced tool to perform that analysis. So secondly, this off-site drainage assessment program does not replace or change the drainage requirements for development, such as the internal drainage system, the need for a drainage study, a detention design, nor does it change the design storms. The ordinance will be clear that an ODA must show no adverse impact as currently defined in the drainage ordinance before that development can be approved. The types of development that require this ODA would be subdivisions, both major and minor, during the preliminary plat process, and commercial development during the development permit process. Single-family development is optional if requested by the owner. This will aid in the building placement within the property boundary. The parish will control the floodplain management plan models and perform the official analysis. A copy of the model can be provided to the developer to assist in their design. And the developer or property owner will pay the fee for the off-site drainage assessment. What those proposed fees look like are on the screen here. For large-scale developments, which we see listed out here, include subdivisions greater than 9 lots, townhome subdivision, condominiums, and PUDs. An initial screening fee of $500 is required. What that screening fee covers is that proposed development is going to be looked at regarding its location and extent within the parish, looking at the models to understand and identify whether or not this could create an impact. If it is deemed to create to potentially create an impact, then it will jump into the step 2, which is the full offsite drainage assessment with an analysis fee of $15,000. The commercial permits for commercial less than 2 acres, the same initial screening fee. For less than 2 acres, $5,000 full ODA fee, and for commercial greater than or equal to 2 acres, a $10,000 fee. As the single family is optional, there is no screening nor offsite drainage assessment fee for a single family home.
Look, can you go back? So what's that screening process look like? How do we get from step 1 to step 2?
So if you could imagine, I'm gonna go back. So if I were looking at, so they will submit, they would submit their permit, provide what they're planning to do. We would look at the existing conditions model as this. We would see where that's located. And this one is fairly simple. We would easily determine that this could potentially have an impact, and it would go to step 2.
Okay, so we're just looking at the footprint.
So it's the parish's, yeah, it's at the
in the
parish's
existing,
discretion,
uh,
within the model results of existing conditions.
okay.
So we could look at a couple of things. This is looking at flood depth. Another critical factor is looking at what the flow velocities are. If it's in a high velocity area, potentially also to create impacts if it's in a high velocity and a large depth. The combination of those two is certainly a critical area that we would want to preserve.
Mr. Poche, this might be a question for you. Are we thinking just in the flood zone, or is this all development, whether it's in AE or
I think
X?
that between staff, the ERA, between the engineering staff, we were gonna look at something, and we need to determine whether we feel that it'll have an impact.
Okay.
Whether it's in a flood zone, not in a flood zone, it's kinda like if you look at something and you think, if I put a big pile of dirt in the middle of this thing, it's gonna impact something. Right. You know, and there may be some areas of the parish where we will look at it and it's on a hill, it's just very obvious that it's not gonna have an impact. There will be places like that, I assume, around the parish, but I think there will be more places where there is a possibility of an impact than not having the possibility of an impact. But we will make that determination and decide whether they need to move forward and be analyzed further.
Okay. Mr. Joseph, got a question?
Yeah, Mr. Malone, someone just asked you phase 2. Now, on this screen, you just showed us they came back 3 times. So it's up to the developer to come back if he want to submit it again for the 3rd time. He have a 3rd version plan of it? And that cost will be a 3rd step in it?
So if the developer, if it shows impacts, it's not gonna get approved. So if the developer wants his or her development to move forward, they will need to submit revisions until they get an approved
And
offsite drainage assessment.
and every time that would hit them $15,000.
I'll defer to Eric. I think, I'll let you answer that.
Sure. And I've got some information that I'd like to pass out, because when we went to the planning commission, there was a concern about the fees. We looked at a minimum fee plus a fee per acre. I got some information in the last couple of days and put some averages together and came up with some options as far as what we can do. Now, obviously, you're gonna get more on some than you spend. A lot of them, you're gonna spend more than you get. But what we're trying to do is to have an average. You're gonna have a minimum, because just about regardless of the size, you're gonna have a setup portion to it. And that's gonna cost the same regardless of what the size is. And what I've done is I've looked at it as a minimum, and then you get 2 iterations. If you do the $500 initial assessment, and you get 2 iterations for the $5,000 fee. And then each iteration beyond that, if they need to come back and have it analyzed again, it's gonna be $3,000. So it's going to depend not necessarily on the size, but how many times they have to come back to us to have it reviewed. Because the whole idea of allowing them to have this model data is so that they can play with the iterations back and forth, and they should have a fairly decent idea of what it's gonna look like before they submit it back. So that's, if you would allow me, I'd like to pass this out to you, and then you can ask me some more questions.
Yeah, sure.
And one point of clarification I would like to make is that CSRS is not going to get this permit fee. The fee is to the parish. CSRS has engineering review agency contract. We just get paid hourly based on how much time we spend performing the analysis.
Did you have any, here's some more questions, Mr. Joseph?
I mean, and this affect the west side. I mean, I guess once we approve this, this also affect the west side too, Mr. President, I guess?
So this is the reason why we need 2 development districts.
Okay,
What's that, Mr. President?
that's why he needs.
So having discussions with the West Bank Councilman Oliver Joseph, we discussed possibly in the future having 2 development districts, one on the east side, one on the west side, to encourage West Bank development that has been stagnant over the decades previous. So I've had those discussions on monitoring the rules on the east side due to the congestion on this side versus the encouragement of growth on the West Bank as we
Yeah,
plan
we've
for the
done
next
that, like,
exposure.
with the.
Impact fee.
Impact fees, I know about 30%.
Field
give or take.
ordinances, other things that, because the topographics on the west side are completely different than the east side, and so,
I wouldn't imagine, if I was a betting man, I would say more properties than not probably wouldn't get past that phase 1 on the west side.
correct, because they would meet the requirement, it wouldn't
Right, yeah.
necessarily, that's correct. Nonetheless, but
Just, for me, it just
Yeah.
make sure they're aware that this tool is in that box, and it could be based on wherever they develop at.
Yeah.
We
And
do
Chair-
have some flooding area.
we don't have a model on the West Bank.
Yeah, these are
Right.
East Bank basins. so-
Right. I mean, FMP that we did from 21 to 23 was
on the east.
strictly East Bank. We don't even have this
So, yeah.
ability right now.
So they can't even run these scenarios on the west side.
Right.
So we may need to consider that in passing this ordinance, is that, because this is parish-wide ordinances, I believe.
Right,
So we may need to do some amendments.
Gotcha.
okay.
I would tell you just off the bat, Mr. Poche, just kind of, I was just glancing at it that, so me personally, I much prefer this, you know, the form that you just gave us. Right, if you get it on your first time, you know, why should that cost the same as
Yes,
someone who submitted, you know, 4 times?
yes.
And contrary to popular belief, our goal is not to, you know, just collect fees if we don't need them, right? I
Yes.
mean, understand we have employees we need to pay and things like that, but,
Right.
you know, we don't want to, you know, take any kind of, you know, monies that we don't need for the development. So I can tell you without having time to actually study it, I much prefer this, you know, than just a flat
Yeah.
$15,000.
And you can see, I mean, it was really uncanny. The averages really worked out. If you look at the screening average, and then I took the first submittal, average the first two submittals, it's actually less than, more than $5,000. But you are gonna have some that you're gonna have more, you're gonna have some that you're gonna spend a little bit less time on. And then when you go through the average of the third and fourth submittals down there at the bottom, I mean, it's a little over $2,900. So I think the numbers that we have proposed in this are a little bit more in line. And of course, it's like anything else. We can always come back if we see that we are, charging way more than we need to or way less than we need to. We can come back to you guys at any time in the future and request changes.
Because one thing whenever we're doing the F&P, I learned, I mean, or two models that we've, two different ones you showed, each one of those can take 12 to 24 hours to actually, run and get that data, if I'm not
Yes.
mistaken.
Yes.
It's not a quick, easy process. You're not just, plugging in that footprint and it's, 30 seconds later,
Yes.
it's like, okay, here's the impact.
And one thing that I wanted to say was that, and like Stoker said, we're gonna have a release of liability to release the model data, so that each time a project comes up, they will have to request a copy of the model for that basin or whatever area will impact them, so that each time a new project comes up, whatever they get will be the latest, most updated version. And another, I guess, plus or positive, if there's something that happens where there may be some more detailed information needed or something like that, and they do off-site surveying work, there may be some detailed information that we may not have, that we can take, that they provide, that we can put into the model as well. So we want it to try to be a cooperative effort to serve the citizens of the parish and reduce or eliminate as many or all impacts as we possibly can, and so that we can also update the model so that we've got the most accurate information we can get.
Gotcha, okay. Mr. Vornado.
I just wanted to make a statement, kind of piggyback off OJ. There's also like an expense that kind of really has, that's tied to this a little bit. Whenever, the more times they got to submit, basically, the more the developers has got to, whatever engineering firm, they have a considerable amount of cost too for every resubmittal. Every time they got to revise site plans and so on and so forth. So that, with that $15,000 number is something we need to look at. That's a lot of money.
Like, I'm of the mindset, when it comes to or permitting and, anything like that, like, the goal is for us to break even, whatever
Sure.
it costs us, and this, or whatever, which I know there's no way to put that perfect number on there,
Right.
but I think that this model that you just gave us is much more fair.
Okay, and look, if you guys want me to, whatever you want me to do as far as submit it in some kind of form or something, because the main reason I wanted to do this here was so that the discussion could be had at the council meeting. If there are changes you want to make, additional questions that you have or anything, just, let us know, and we'll provide you with whatever you need for the meeting.
Right. Look, and I would tell you, I know we introduced the ordinances at the last one, but is it 3 or 4 different ones that kind of
Yes.
encompass this? So, and all that. So between now and then, hopefully this helps decipher, those apart a little bit. But I got a good feeling that next Thursday we're gonna, have more questions than we do tonight.
Sure. And I mean,
would be my assumption.
The fee was probably the most contentious item, obviously, because you want to get it right, setting the fees. The other items on there are basically defining it, allowing it to be used for our reviews and all of that. So the fees is definitely the most
Right.
contentious portion of it, obviously.
Let's see, Mr. Arsenault has a question.
Yeah, so the numbers on here, this is the cost to the parish, not the cost to the developer, right?
These are the fees that were charged to the city of Central for the reviews based on man hours. What we're trying to do is, we're trying to get an average above or below to make sure that,
Shit, I had a question. So this was the fees that Central owed to CSRS for running these models?
yes.
Right, so this is real dollars that on these developments, CSRS ran for Central,
Based on hours,
right?
yes, sir.
And that's what the city of Central had to pay CSRS, so that's what it costs the
To
developer.
review, that's what it costs,
Okay,
yes,
perfect.
correct.
There you go.
Well,
actual cost.
to clarify.
Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off, Mr. Arsenault. I was a little confused myself.
Everything you said till the very end was correct.
Okay.
And that was not the cost to the developer. For the first year, City of Central covered the fee
Got you.
to understand how much it would cost to develop a fee structure. They then implemented a fee structure after the first year, which was a $500 screening fee and a minimum of $5,000 for the full ODA, plus $125 per acre of the site. And that was for subdivisions of greater than 5 lots and all commercial.
The purpose of my question was to make sure that this, if it's a bigger development, shouldn't they be paying more for what they're doing, as opposed to the little guy pays 15 grand, but it only costs the parish 5 grand? And that's things we can get into, but I was just trying to clarify.
That's the purpose of trying to submit based on the actual data. Because if we set the 5 grand minimum, if it's determined after the initial screening that they're gonna need to do an off-site drainage analysis, then it's gonna cost a set amount just about to set something up. Now, you could probably do something where you looked at commercial developments and said anything less than 1 acre, 2 acres or something like that would be a little bit less, a fee, $2,500, and then anything over 2 acres would be the minimum $5,000, and that's completely up to you guys. You can look at this information and make that determination. I ran averages on them, and I was pretty comfortable with the averages. There's gonna be some, like I said, that we're gonna charge more than we will pay in consultant fees, and then there are gonna be others, as you can see on here, that it's gonna cost us more than we're gonna charge the developer for it.
Where did that,
Yeah,
What-
Mr. Warner.
where was the 15,000 number? That's just kind of arbitrary number y'all kind of put on there?
That was something that CSRS put together just as an all-encompassing number. They looked at what they had done, and they put that number on there. We wanted something quick and easy to present to the planning commission, but we had a pretty good idea that it was gonna be questioned, obviously, and so I wanted to get some more detailed numbers, and that's how we came up with this.
Gotcha, thank you.
Let me ask you, is it possible to be just as simple as whatever it costs CSRS to run the model, that's what someone pay, like whatever the parish gets billed for?
You can do that. I mean, we do that because we do the traffic studies now, but the thing about the traffic studies is we get a fee from a consultant, and then we say, okay, this is how much it's gonna cost. Whereas when you're doing something like this, you don't know how many iterations you're gonna have. You don't know the man hours that are gonna be in there beforehand. And a lot of developers, even though it may cost them a little bit more money, they're gonna say, they wanna know what it is up front. They doing their performa, they working with their developers and their clients and all of that, and they wanna have a fairly firm idea of what it's gonna cost them to do that.
Gotcha, okay. Any more questions for Mr. Stoker or Mr. Poche?
I think there may be a couple more
Yeah,
slides there.
yeah, until we move on. but
Okay, sure.
I don't want to skip anybody.
Rounding me off.
I'll start talking and I'll ignore all my yellow dots on my screen.
All good. Understanding the timing of where this occurs, the screening is within the pre-application process, and the ODA, if applicable, occurs in the preliminary plat submittal review, process time 30 to 60 days, and in the construction plan approval process. For a building permit, both of those happen within the permit approval process, 20 to 30 days. The proposed timeline, we started back in May, giving presentations, starting with the Planning Commission, presenting those proposed changes to the Planning Commission for recommendation to you all and the Parish Council. Introduce it to the council on June 20th. We're here tonight to present these changes to you all. Not sure if actual recommendations to the parish council is on the agenda. I'm not a lawyer or anything. And then finally, the parish council will hold a public hearing and vote on the ordinances on the 18th. And I think that's it, yeah.
And
Chair?
I think the planning meeting went pretty well, also, like, they had a little more time with it. I would encourage y'all to go back and watch that. I think it was June 12th was the planning meeting when y'all presented. I would go watch that on the YouTube, because I thought they had really good questions as well. Yeah, hang on, let me exit out of my big screen. Yeah, Mr.
So
President.
it seems like, to me, that there's a lot of questions about the fees. Would you like the administration to break down some scenarios and be a little more flexible with what's being proposed on our screen versus what's happening with Central? Find some kind of happy medium and bring that back to y'all to take a look? Would that be?
Yeah, I mean, I won't speak for my colleagues, but like, my goal is, if it costs us $4,800, for someone to do it, I don't want their $15,000. And if it costs someone $31,000, I want more than their $15,000. I just think that's fair from my advantage point.
Okay, we'll be happy to get with Eric and run some scenarios and some different fee schedules, present those to y'all, at least 3 or 4, and get some feedback from y'all to see what direction you want to head in, and do a little more precise, possibly by the hour as we get into additional submittals. Maybe a little lower fee on the front end for that initial ODA. We'll take a look. I like Central's layout here, and you can tell it's obviously a lot done by the hour due to the flexibility of the different amounts there. And even though you got a 1 acre in there, which is kind of surprising to me, but nonetheless, I don't know the circumstance for which that 1 acre is being developed. But let us run some scenarios and bring those back to y'all to get some flexibility, because it seems to be the hang up on most of this. Seems like we're good to go with the process and the reasoning for it, but the fees may be a major concern. So we can certainly run some scenarios.
Gotcha. And I do have some more questions from my colleagues. Mr. Joseph.
Yes, I seen on your one of the drive, you say that you're gonna run about 60 days for the permit, the approval of this. Currently, for submittal of a subdivision or any of this, how long is taking right now for them to get approval on it? And would this add additional time that we might have to put on our approval of a plan for submittal of anything like that?
Currently, preliminary plats are generally within a 60-day time period. We have had, since we are doing the traffic studies, we also have traffic engineers at our disposal now on staff. So there are a little bit deeper discussions in more discussions on setting of the scope of the traffic studies. And basically, the code is such now that if we have an item that is not complete, the submittal's not considered complete. And so we have been going between 60 and 90 days to Planning Commission. Once that is done, then obviously they will start on their construction drawings and all of that. But for the preliminary plat, this is something that would need to be done along with their drainage study. And I wouldn't anticipate it adding any more time to it. I mean, anything is possible, but.
Okay.
I can give you some, we've run tens of, I don't know what number we're at now, but we can turn in a single review, a single analysis within a 2-week period. So, however, depending on how many iterations they need to go through, might eat at the number of days that it's going to take. But in terms of an initial submittal and getting that initial answer within that time frame.
Cool.
Just for clarification, the time frame wouldn't actually start until they submitted their plat or whatever. That doesn't have effect based on the ODA. Like if they submit and it showed negative effects, right, and we give that back to them and say, look, you need to come back to us with a better plan, Like, has that timeline started?
I mean, that would be something, it wouldn't necessarily have to be directly tied to the preliminary plat. I have had one or two folks in the last year or so that they wanted to submit the traffic study early and get that going because we control the traffic study. Somebody could do something like that the same way for this, so that they could even decide, hey, look, man, I don't think this site will work for you, or something like that. I mean, that could be part of their pro forma before they ever officially submit. So, I mean, that's certainly possible, too. It's not necessary, it doesn't have to be tied to a preliminary plat submit.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know, if developers are listening, I would highly encourage them to take into account the understanding of their layout related to the floodplains and the flow and what the model is saying, because the last thing anybody wants a developer to do is get all the way to the end of a design and then it completely failed the offsite drainage assessment because they didn't take any of that into account, and then they have to go all the way back and redo a design, right? So just like you're saying, they're implementing and trying to understand from a big picture the traffic. Recommend they understand from a big picture the drainage.
Gotcha. Mr. Joseph, you good?
I'm good.
Okay. Mr. Arsenault?
Yeah, I just want to clarify, I love the tool. I think it's innovative, it's what we need. I just want to make sure that, you know, if I'm developing and it only costs you guys $5,000 for mine, I don't want to spend 15 grand when the next guy's gonna, you know, get half of his for free, basically. So, I really like what we're doing.
Mr. Hillinsbeck?
Like, I'm sure this software or whatever costs a good chunk of change to develop. So to me, I don't have a problem making a profit off of it, but not gouging people. That's it.
Ms. Alonso?
You said earlier with developers, they want their figure up front, but that's difficult to figure out because of hours. So how can we ensure that the parish is not out funds? If we tell them it's 30, it ends up being 42.
Well, being honest with you, we generally end up on the low side because we're very cautious about charging people way more than we need to. Because like Chase has been saying, we don't want to make money off of these things. We want to try to come as close to breaking even as possible. It's just like anything else in a development. A developer and his engineer want to know what the rules are and what the fees are when they get started, because they sit down and they have meetings amongst themselves months, sometimes years before they ever even think about doing a project, and look at the numbers, look at the places. A lot of times that's how they may select a site. They may do preliminary, gather preliminary information on a site or several sites and look at all of those factors together before they ever decide whether to move forward.
Yeah, because I mean, like, we don't want to do price gouging or overcharge somebody,
Certainly.
but likewise, we don't want to be caught short either.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's correct. And we try to stay as close to even as we can get.
Okay, thank you.
And if I can add just a little bit to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So that 500 screening fee is going to be like critical, right? That's going to give a developer an idea. Like, and as we develop our learning curve here, our planning department is going to be able to say to a developer who runs a scenario and just doesn't work. And then the developer comes 5 years later and he's going to be able to tell him, listen, they ran this several times and could not make this property work because of its topographic features. Just want to let you know, you move forward at your own risk here because this hasn't passed the test. And so as we develop these properties that are questionable and shouldn't be developed due to the impacts of the surrounding neighbors or overall any other adjacent properties, we're going to be able to know that over time as this tool develops. But that $500 really is going to be the key for them to do an assessment at that point in time on whether they want to move forward to a more expensive ODA. And again, we'll run some different fee scenarios to see if we can get that 15 to be more something realistic with a flat fee and then a per hour after that, just so that we don't fall short, but we don't over gouge either. And so we're going to do some various different fee structures for y'all to take a look at.
Mr. Bonadou?
I think he basically covered it. he basically covered it. The model's great for exactly that. It saves time with administration and whatnot as far as reviews. It cuts down on the reviews potentially, if those properties can't, nothing be done with them. So I think it saves money on a lot of fronts, but I think the hourly rate thing is definitely something we need to look at besides like a flat rate, because every project's definitely different. The drainage is different on all of them, so the engineering time on each one could be totally different. So, yeah, I think we need to encourage some kind of hourly rate with a fair upfront rate. Maybe a three-tier elevated rate or something with hourly rate attached to it, but the 500 for the initial review, yeah, that's definitely workable too. Thank you.
I don't have any more questions, but just a comment. Look, as far as the H&H, right, back in, I think it's January or February of 2021, whenever we started the FMP, right? Like I mean, this was the ultimate goal, right? Your projects, let's get our projects and our capital improvements for the parish, but also let's put this in place. And if memory serves right, I think it cost us 2.4 million, 2.5 million for us to, for the H&H for the entire east bank of the parish. So, yeah, we spent a lot of money on it, and I think it's going to be a phenomenal tool.
We need some reimbursement.
Huh?
We need some reimbursement.
No, I'm excited because whenever Stoker pitched us this back at the end of 2020, the central, like I want to say, I can't remember if that's the exact same example you showed us, but it was great, right?
It was.
Huh?
It was the same example.
Yeah, it's like you put that footprint right in the middle of that flow, and immediately, right? Like that is not a smart idea, as is to put that there. And it took 3 tries, but he was, whoever that developer was really close to being, a really good neighbor and being part of the community. Let's build homes, but let's also be a good neighbor. So I'm excited. I'm gonna have to dive into the literature really, really deep. I mean, the ordinances are not short; they're not easy to understand. So, Mr. Vornado has another question.
Yeah, just a comment. I just think the tool itself is just irreplaceable. I'm glad we're doing it. I'm glad y'all initiated it years ago. Glad the taxpayers obviously paid for it. And it's just something where, just like the instance you showed us, that there's kind of no arguing that. For years, it's been kind of arbitrary on, oh, well, does this flood people? Does this move water here? Now there's kind of no arguing that. It's either you put it in there and it works, or it don't. And I think that's what the folks at the parish has been wanting for a long time. And I think it's a great tool. I think it's going to be awesome. Thank you.
Chair.
Yeah.
So there are, when we run this, and we've looked at it several times, and even on that little example, they showed how the interstate, you gotta remember, roads are dams. We just focused on developments, but roads are actual dams, and you can see how it consolidates these floodplains down to narrow box culverts and a lot of other issues, including previous developments that you can clearly see that scenario exist on current developments within Ascension that did not have to do this process. And so there's a lot of those, and we may just create some examples for y'all to look at that where those restrictions exist today based on running these models, because they do, and some of them are eye-catching and very, very shocking. So we'll see if we can get some examples of those that exist today too, so that you know kind of what you're looking for in the future.
And I like to be my glass half full. I envision there's going to be scenarios to where someone wants to build something, and this actually may create less work for them, right? If they put in a footprint, and maybe it's not as bad as anybody thought it was going to be, right? And then so instead of just inputting more rules and more kind of red tape to develop that just because honestly the last few years. Right, I mean, we kind of need to change something. Nobody's building anything right now. We can't continue like that, right? So maybe this has, some positive effect as far as, right. This with the field ordinance, which, we'll address that another day too. We need some changes there, but no, great presentation. Any more questions from my colleagues or for Mr. Eric, Mr. Stoker? How do we let Sean sit back there the whole time without having to answer anything?
I pulled the short straw.
About to say, I don't like the, yeah. He didn't have the jacket. Thank y'all so much. We
Thank you.
appreciate it. Okay, moving on. General business 6B, approval of task order proposal for the 2024 concrete lining project, Ascension Trace lateral, Highway 74 lateral and Francine Circle lateral by Hartman Engineering, in amount not to exceed $206,000. Mr. Savoy, you want to give us a little overview, please?
Yeah, sure. And some of you may or may not be aware, last year was our first go at the concrete lining pilot program. We did that in Villa Galvez and the Bayou Francois lateral and the courthouse lateral. Very successful projects. A lot of positive feedback on that, especially the Villa Galvez area. People that were having some trouble, some flooding problems are now seeing some benefits of that. And also our maintenance crews that were having to do all this maintenance by hand, that maintenance has now been eliminated. This is the next round that we've seen of prone areas, especially in Ascension Trace. I want to say it's a couple of 1,000 feet of ditch, very large drainage ditch in Ascension Trace, that has to be cut with weed eaters on a solid rotation every year. And it's got a lot of standing water in there. Jarrett and I walked the entire section out. It's been a troublesome area for Councilman Turner for years, and we feel like this project would really mitigate that in that area. The Highway 74 outfall is just, I would say, south of I-10 on the west side of Highway 73, by Belle Savon development there. There's a section of channel there that's really large, and it cannot get in there with maintenance crews other than by hand. And Francine Circle's the same case. It's these areas that have a lot of erosion, a lot of maintenance issues, and are repetitive problems for Jade and his maintenance guys. And this would be the next candidate for 2024's. This is for the engineering and bid packages.
Okay.
To put those projects out for bid.
Any questions for Mr. Savoy? Chair, entertain a motion. I have a motion by Mr. Hillingsbag, a second by Ms. Alonso. Any objection? Hearing none, so moved. Drainage report, is Mr. Monzon here? Oh, dude, I did not see Dan Tanner sitting there. I would have had you come up earlier too to talk.
So I am not John Monzon. My name's Dan Tanner. I'm with HNTB. I'm an engineer over there working on the ADAPT program. Just a little background, kind of touching on the history. The floodplain management plan, we were responsible for putting that together, developing those models. All the stuff Stoker's working on now is a great use of that tool. Another avenue coming out of that is more on the capital project side and looking at like big projects, drainage projects that can reduce flooding and flood risk throughout the parish. A part of that management plan, we put together 30 projects, preliminary projects that really kind of took that into account and tried to reduce water surface elevations. That has evolved into the ADAPT program. That ADAPT program is kind of managing some of those projects and just really focused more on the capital side of it. Let's see if I can pull this presentation up. So this presentation is kind of going to give a little briefing of what day-to-day is going on right now on the ADAPT program and some of the things that we are working on. It's kind of high level, but if any questions at the end come up, please feel free to ask. So the program really focuses on 4 different buckets. The buckets are the grant management. We use the tools from the floodplain management plan to develop grant applications. We respond to RFIs. We really focus on leveraging the local funds and securing federal funds and state funds to help with these drainage projects. The project management, we have monthly meetings with different project teams to kind of track how they are going. We do plan review. The third bucket is the program controls. We're really looking at scheduling and budgets and helping the parish plan for the next couple years. We'll kind of dive into each of these buckets a little bit more, but from a high level. And then the data management, this is the storing of the files, kind of the tracking of the projects, trying to really streamline some of the processes behind the capital projects. So this is a lot of information. This is all of the grant applications that have been submitted since the start of the ADAPT program. It's a significant amount of money. The hot items on here, kind of the active things right now, are the LWI program. The pre-applications were approved for those two projects, and we're going to the full application stage. We've been meeting with the LWI folks for monthly and kind of working through those full application items. And then the statewide flood control that went to the House Bill number 2. That bill went to the governor, and I believe it was recently signed. So we're waiting on an award letter on those statewide flood control projects. One other thing on the grant management side, we're developed a grant calendar. And what that does is tracks all the grant opportunities that are out in the future, and we're trying to make sure we don't miss anything. We stay ahead of future opportunities for leveraging the local funds. The second bucket is the project management. These are the 10 top projects that the ADAPT program is monitoring. Some of the services provided on the project management side are, like I talked about, reviewing plans, monthly project meetings, really, any kind of administrative services around the project, tracking construction, developing scopes for new projects, just a handful of services really to help Ron and his team with any, to ultimately reduce risk on some of these projects. That's our goal. So this is a busy slide also. This is the program controls, and we're working through this currently. Some of the numbers on here I wouldn't focus on. Some of it isn't filled out, but we've developed a project schedule for all of our capital projects. We have budgets associated with each of those tasks. On that left side, you can kind of see the task. It's broken out into a duration and put out on a schedule. That budget is baked into that timeline, and ultimately, we can look at a monthly burn for each funding source by project. We're working right now with Ron, Dawn, and the team to kind of grow this for the 10 projects. But the benefit of doing this project level is you can roll it up into, a total program by month and look at monthly burns that the parish is going to be responsible for. And yearly, annual. This helps with the budgeting process for the drainage side. And look, I'll caveat this: it's impossible to hit this head on, but the schedules move constantly. But this is a starting point, a best guess. It gives us good averages. We're in the process of working with Dawn and Ron, and we hope in the next couple of months to have something finalized on this end. And then the last bucket, the
Dan,
data.
real quick.
Go ahead.
I really like that because. Look, so over the last 3 to 5 years, we've gotten a lot of federal money and LWI money, and a lot of that is match. And I think we've all been concerned for the last 18, 24 months about everything, inflation, everything going up. I'm really worried about, are we going to be able to get all the projects done in our timeline? So I'm really excited about this aspect for the 5 and 10 year, outlook that we've been planning for.
Yep, it's definitely allowing us to kind of strategize what portion of projects we're working on now, which, if it's a federally funded thing, all right, we can roll with that. It allows us to strategize how the capital program is working. And some preliminary numbers, yeah, we're definitely looking at, whoa, we need to lighten up this year. We need to move things.
Right, some of these projects, initially, on the early engineering, like the Marvin Bro levee, that was, $65, $70 million. Like, can we still do it for 65 or 70 million, or is that now an $80 million project? Like just looking long term. The same thing on the Conway pumping station and tying in that levee, right? I know we have those funds, and that was a 20% match. I think we dedicated somewhere around $4 to $5 million. Like, I'm just worried about the dollars that we've already passed resolutions for to fund. How those numbers are going to fall out. Is that going to take us 7 years to complete instead of 5? Like, are we going to have to extend that budget? So this spreadsheet, I think right here, is going to be really beneficial for us.
Yep. And I apologize that the numbers are not all filled out. We're in the process on it. These are I just wanted to kind of give an idea of where we're
Right.
going and what the end goal is. And then data management, this one, we set up a OneDrive link that kind of tracks all the files. We're really trying to streamline some of the processes around submittals for consultants and projects, and just properly track the budgets, properly track the schedules, really kind of help Ron and his team with efficiently managing the data. On the right side, you can see we develop project sheets for each of these projects. We meet every 2 weeks with Ron and his team, and we kind of go through everything that's current on these projects to make sure that we're not missing anything, we're not missing, anything's falling through the cracks. But it is really, I think the ADAPT program at first was a little bit unclear exactly where we would provide the value, but I do feel that, and I'd be curious, but I feel that the value is starting to show itself. And then that's it. That's, any questions?
Do we have any questions for Mr. Tanner? I'm a little embarrassed for y'all. Dan Tanner, full house, not a single, nothing? All right.
Had to do it, Chase.
I had to do it. Thank you, Mr. Tanner. I do appreciate it.
Thank
Look,
you.
before we adjourn, Mr. Joseph, I believe he wanted.
Right. I noticed the drainage report, and I had talked to Mr. Jay about this, and I wanted to give him to give us an update on the Moran subdivision project. I know a couple of months ago, we had the community come in there, and they wanted the project drainage done, but we found out we didn't have right-of-way, and from that point on, the parish have been working on it. Can you give me and the public update on that situation, Jake, if you don't mind?
Yeah, thank you. So we all know this involves 56 lots. It's a 50-year-old neighborhood. So we divided this into 3 major groups, basically the roadways, the way ditches run. The first road would be, rear drainage would be between Pappy Road and Richard Miles Road. We are 2 servitudes away from starting that. We hit a brick wall. We had 3 as of this morning. One, we found that now they're clearing an adjacent lot, so we're able to access it from that adjacent lot. So we have a verbal confirmation that we're going to be able to get that servitude. Spoke with JP earlier. There may be some misunderstanding with the residents. We have one resident that thinks we're taking their land. We have another resident that works out of town. We've had 2 meetings with him that he's supposed to be in town, and he's not shown or called for either. So this is something we're maybe working with, getting a little different communication from the legal department to help them understand what we are asking for and what we're trying to deliver here. So as we get these next 3 servitudes, we'll allow to go in, and we'll start on in between the Pappy and Richard Miles. That'll also allow us to start the roadside drainage also. We found when we went in there and we looked at the roadside drainage, you're digging that uphill, basically, you have nowhere for it to drain. So it will allow us to put 2 crews in there, but this definitely is something that the residents have to help us with. It is a big task. The other 2 phases, we're working on that diligently. We have a lot of that paperwork ready. Mike's did a great job with the servitudes. So if we could get a little more participation out of the residents, and I think some communication maybe developed from legal may help us with that. I think we can do something with this and move forward.
All right. Well, Ms. Jake, thanks for that update, and I encourage the residents of that neighborhood. We need them to participate in this project. And for them to have better drainage, it takes them to get involved. We can't move forward, and as the parish president said, he ain't going to jail for nobody. So, if he don't get the right document, then the parish equipment would not be on that property. So if you listen tonight, get your neighbors, talk to your neighbors to get them encouraged to sign the paperwork. We're not trying to steal any one property. We're just trying to get you a better drainage system. So thank you very much, Mr. Jay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep. We have a motion to adjourn from Mr. Vornado. A second by Mr. Hillensbeck. We are adjourned. Thank you.